Hey everyone, welcome back. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story. Chapter 974. Natural Sounds Welcome the Moon 1. Guru Eastnether's words drifted out over the formation. To Su Qing, the raspy sound of her voice seemed to carry with it the passage of ancient time. Her explanation of countless ghosts haunting the night was definitely more detailed than what he'd learned before. Combined with what he could observe with his god perception, Su Qing was certain that the delicate but rotting hand was most likely the hand of the musician who had played Natural Sounds Welcome the Moon in the Golden Crow's palace. It was also critical to finding the dragon chariot. But why is Yin entangled up with it? Su Qing looked at Yin Yan. Her special constitution ensured that her body was free from mutagen. However, Su Qing couldn't quite figure out what about her constitution produced that result. I bet Master could. After he's out of seclusion, I'll ask him. Maybe he already knows why Yin Yan's constitution is special. After some thought, a look of determination settled on his face. Regardless of the reason, dealing with the hand would resolve the karma that had come to exist with it and Yin Yan. That was the most important thing to deal with right now. Therefore, he didn't hesitate about what to do next. All of a sudden, the ruins in that dark section of the sea floor with innumerable evil ghosts suddenly went silent. It wasn't that the ghosts had ceased their howling. Instead, Su Qing had taken away all the sound from that area. It became his power, his killing intent, and his weapon. It turned into a gruish attack that he sent with crushing force toward the delicate hand. The noiseless seafloor went wild, as if it had been struck by a tempest. Terrifying mightiness surged from the seafloor to the surface, causing huge waves to break out. And yet there was no noise. There was a new master controlling all the sound in the area. The godly authority of sound was fully unleashed. But as the strange scene developed, the eye on the hand snapped open. The pupil was crimson and radiated endless ferocity. At the same time, the fingers started moving even more frantically as if to pluck the strings of a musical instrument. Something similar to the godly authority of sound erupted from the hand. This was different from any of the godly entities Su Qing had encountered before. Normally speaking, godly entities had godliness and god source, but no godly authority. In fact, of all the godly entities Su Qing had killed recently in the Forbidden Sea, he hadn't seen any godly authority at all. But contrary to expectation, this severed hand did have godly authority. An instant later, the evil ghosts whose sound Su Qing had taken all shivered. Then they recovered from their previous state, and the quiet seafloor suddenly exploded with the sound of piercing, ghostly shrieks. And that turned into a power that slammed into the attack Su Qing had just unleashed. Explosive sound swept out across the seafloor, but then only a moment later, everything went silent again. The sound went back and forth in that manner. Everything got loud, then everything went completely silent, as the hand and Su Qing struggled back and forth. It was the same with the evil ghosts. Their screaming came and went in jerks and fits. This was a battle over godly authority. Godly battles like this were rare, and when they did occur among gods, they usually ended only with the death of one party. When two gods encountered each other who had the same type of godly authority, then the result would be a struggle over that authority. And in this case, that struggle was over the sound of the evil ghosts. As the fighting went back and forth, many of the evil ghosts couldn't sustain the force and exploded. Overall, the power of the sound seized by Su Qing was increasing. His godly authority had been acquired in an orthodox way, partly by enlightenment and partly because of the vestige in his fleshly body's void soil. In terms of personhood, it was at the peak. As a result, he had the advantage in this struggle. However, though Su Qing had the upper hand, the delicate hand's eye, seeing that it was in a deadly situation, grew more vicious. Then veins snaked out from the blood-red pupil, filling the area around it until a blood-red tear formed. When the tear appeared, the surrounding evil ghosts shivered, turned and focused on Su Qing. Then, without any pause, and without any concern that some of them instantly self-detonated as a result, they howled madly. But, just like that, the sound was taken away. Yet again, noiselessness turned into noise, and a sound wave erupted from the blood-red tear. It turned into a blood-colored meteor that shot from the seafloor through the water, out of the surface, and toward Suqing in East Nether Isle. The entire island started shaking as a result. After having done that, the vicious eye seemed to weaken. Spinning, it swept up the thousands and thousands of surrounding ghosts and prepared to flee into the depths of the sea. The cultivators on East Nether Isle saw the blood-colored meteor rocketing toward them and were rocked down to the level of their souls. Sir Bloodsmelter and Guru East Nether had it a bit better off, but they were still shaken internally. Suqing looked up at the meteor. This counterattack was by no means unexpected. Given what he knew about this severed hand, he had been prepared all along to deal with the authority of sound. After all, this hand once belonged to a musician of the sun. He had no idea why the hand of this musician survived the arrival of the broken face, nor who was controlling its will. Was it the will of the original musician, or was it some other discarnate will that had taken over? Regardless, he had been waiting for the counterattack. He stepped up into the air, and an instant later was in front of the blood-colored meteor. There he extended his right hand toward the night sky. There was no sun in that sky, but that didn't mean there was no sun in existence. It just meant that the sun that covered this area wasn't around. In revered ancient, there was always a sun shining somewhere. The profound sun immortal light magic was capable of taking the light of more than just the sun above the head of the person using the technique. An instant later, drifting bits of dawn light floated through the night to gather around Suqing. The night turned bright. Suqing was like an early morning sun, hovering between heaven and earth, casting light out into the cosmos. Extending his hand, he pushed toward the blood-colored meteor. Blinding light ripped apart the night and the meteor. They were erased. Suqing devoured the darkness. He devoured the blood-colored light. Then, scintillating light surrounded him as he shot down into the forbidden sea. The cultivators on East Nether Isle who saw this happen were shaken to the core of their being. To them, it looked as if an actual sun had dropped into the sea. It was like a legend playing out in real life. The golden crow perished, Guru East Nether said quietly, and the countless movements became sinister. You and I both know that the legend is probably true. Given what we just saw, I'd say it's absolutely certain it did. And this Suqing, I just have to wonder how strong he'll get eventually. Sir Bloodsmelter cleared his throat. I'm not sure how strong he'll get, but what won't change throughout all the eons is that he's my grand apprentice. Guru East Nether looked quietly at Yin, whose infatuated eyes were fixed on the spot where Suqing had just disappeared. Then she said, "You haven't visited with your grand apprentice very often. Next time you're here, why not invite him back?" The sky over East Nether Isle was once again dark, with only a bit of flickering moonlight illuminating the scene below. There was also a bit of shimmering light coming from the water below, although it soon faded away. Suqing was in the form of a sun as he sped along the seafloor, casting light in all directions. He was pursuing the severed hand. Along the way, he converted all sound into speed. There was a moon just barely visible in the sky, and perhaps because of his influence it was violet, causing violet moonlight to shine down into the water. Numerous vicious sea beasts who were too slow to get out of the way exploded. Their blood also boosted his speed. Sadly, it was a day of misfortune for those beasts. It was also a day of misfortune for the hand and the ghosts that Suqing pursued. However, what was misfortune for them was good fortune for Suqing. He continued to accelerate. Enough time passed for an incense stick to burn. Then, in a location on the seafloor covered by black, encompassing seaweed, the fleeing hand experienced doomsday. Dazzling brightness filled the area. Rumbling sounds could be heard as immortal light spread everywhere, filled with good fortune and the effects of the blood. Then Suqing stepped onto the scene, right into the path of the hand and the ghosts. The undying emperor's fist gave rise to a tempest on the seafloor, bolstered by the same gruish attack as before. At the same time, the violet moonlight that reached the seafloor became like a sealing power. However, the severed hand was extraordinary. In that moment of incredible danger, its eye turned ruthless and cold, and the fingers began to pluck invisible musical strings. Around it, the countless ghosts went mad and began devouring each other. In an instant, the thousands of evil ghosts ravenously reduced their own number down to exactly 100. 1. The appearance of the 100 ghosts also changed. They became more vicious as they arrayed themselves in an orderly fashion and began to howl in a way that was unlike what Su Qing had heard before. It was the same sound from countless ghosts haunting the night, but it was more complete. The moment the sound spread out, the ocean turned cold and sinister. Su Qing's violet moon godly authority shivered and began to move in that direction, as if the song had an indescribable power over the moon. Then, gradually, an image appeared within the ghostly sound. A rotting moon began to rise up from the seafloor, upon which was visible a face. Chapter 975. Play the music. Dawn would soon come to the forbidden sea, but right now it was still night. Darkness covered everything, like a hidden god sending godly power out. The water was black as was the sky. In the end, it was hard to tell if that god was overhead or under the surface of the water. Was the color of the sea invading the sky, or was the sky crushing down into the sea? In the end, it didn't matter to the various species that inhabited the forbidden sea. Day and night were the same to them. On the surface of the black water, boats could be seen bobbing up and down. In the sky, birds soared through the darkness hunting for food. And on the seafloor, the severed hand was moving at top speed. Occasionally it was clearly visible, and occasionally it would become a blur. Whenever that transition occurred, it was when the hand was teleporting a great distance. Any sea beast it encountered would wither in an instant as their godliness and life force was absorbed like nutrients by the hand, lending it additional speed. Additionally, everywhere it went, everything went silent. All sound was suppressed by its godly authority. It knew that though sound was its own weapon, it was also the weapon of its pursuer. Unfortunately, no matter how much it accelerated, that ghoulish pursuer who could take away sound was always there. No efforts to shake him amounted to anything, and the distance between the two of them was decreasing. That was because Su Qing wasn't just using the godly authority of sound to boost his speed. Misfortune could aid him as well, plus the violet moon. In fact, the mutagen in the Forbidden Sea itself was an aid to Su Qing, at least to a certain extent. His fleshly body was terrifyingly shocking. Therefore, after another incense stick's worth of time passed, the sea water around the severed hand suddenly filled with vines made of water. The vines swept out noiselessly to block the hand's path forward, and its path of retreat. The hand turned to flee in a different direction, but the water vines shifted to block that route as well. In the blink of an eye, every path was obstructed. Endless vines made of water appeared, encircling the severed hand and fusing with each other. The hand tried to break free, but there was no end to the vines, and eventually it had to stop moving. As a result, it was quickly surrounded by so many vines of water that it became like a cocoon on the seafloor. A ceiling that only lasted for a few breaths of time before the hand finally managed to break free. The vine cocoon collapsed, and a rumbling sound echoed out for the first time during the chase. The boom only lasted for a moment before the hand took the sound away. Unfortunately, it was too late. Almost as soon as the rumbling occurred, Su Qing stepped out of the sound in bizarre fashion to stand right in front of the severed hand. The sage heaven god vine emerged from the vines of water, sending out emotional fluctuations to indicate that it had succeeded. Then it became another host of water vines that sealed the hand. Little Shadow wasn't willing to fall behind, so it spread out to cover the seafloor in all directions. The poison of Su Qing's god curse then emerged, making the seawater even blacker than before. Having accomplished these things, Su Qing looked at the hand with gleaming eyes. This hand was critical to his goal of calling to the dragon chariot. Stepping forward, he stomped his foot onto the hand. As he did, the hand's eye flashed with red light, and ghostly figures flew out into the open. Once again, the howl of evil ghosts echoed out. At any moment, deadly music would erupt. "I'm the only one allowed to make any sound here," Su Qing said calmly. The moment he spoke the words, the howling of the ghosts stopped. The sound had been taken away and crushed. The severed hand shivered. Then its eye became even redder than before, and a teardrop of blood emerged from it. Terrifying might pulsed off it as it shot towards Su Qing like an arrow. The teardrop caused the water to boil around it as it bore down on him. With venom, madness, and boundless hatred, Su Qing shimmered with light and prepared to unleash immortal light. But then his eyes glittered. Dispelling the light, he advanced, allowing the red teardrop to slam into him. It made no sound. Su Qing shivered as a stabbing sensation filled him, but nothing else happened. Nothing short of an imperial sovereign could do anything to shake his fleshly body, or make him feel like his soul and body were being separated. He lifted his foot and again stomped down onto the severed hand. He let the red light surge, and allowed the evil ghosts to appear around him. He even let the hand perform an incantation gesture with its fingers. Clenching his right hand into a fist, he launched a fist strike. The fist seemed undying, but the reality was that Su Qing had altered it. By adding within the 9 springs, which Master Seventh had taught him, it made the blow even more of a combination of illusory and corporeal. As before, there was no sound. 1. The hand tumbled backward. The reality was that its battle prowess wasn't on the same level as its sound manipulation powers. Using natural sounds welcome the moon to summon the rotting moon was the most formidable thing it could do. Maybe if Su Qing didn't have the godly authority of sound, then facing this gruish severed hand would have been very challenging, and would have required much more brute force. But right now, the hand was like a toothless snake. It was being forced to use methods it wasn't skilled at to engage in combat. It was easy to predict who would win and who would lose. After enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, Su Qing's powerful fleshly body and sound-seizing abilities overwhelmed anything the severed hand could produce. He just kept advancing and launching blows. The severed hand was being knocked back over and over again. Its evil ghosts were constantly being dispersed, its tears were being shattered, and everything it did failed. As it fell back, it got dimmer and dimmer, and the eye on the palm continuously seemed like it would collapse. Its aura was getting weak. Eventually, Su Qing's hand stopped only a few inches from the eye itself. He didn't complete the blow. He didn't want to wipe the severed hand out of existence. He wanted to control it. After damaging it severely enough, he sent his God perception out, surrounded it, and then suppressed it fully, from God source to God perception to godly authority to personhood. The hand shivered. Clearly, it had been fully suppressed. However, the blood-red eye in the palm was glaring at him madly. All of a sudden, fluctuations of self-detonation began to rise up in it. That was not the result Su Qing wanted. The moment the hand revealed that it planned to self-detonate, Su Qing sent out the sound of the golden crow. It was a crisp, clear sound that echoed in all directions. A black sea of flame sprang up with Su Qing at the center. Within that sea of fire was the golden crow, which circled about over Su Qing's head. It had a black body surrounded by black fire, as well as countless feathers that were like fiery snowflakes. The black color it emanated was starkly beautiful. The severed hand trembled. The golden crow circled one more time, then flew to Su Qing and fused into him, becoming an imperial robe and crown. As of this moment, Su Qing stood there looking very much like the young man who was the golden crow. He even had the same aura. The severed hands I saw all of this and shook even harder. It was even possible to hear a piercing chant coming from it. This time, Su Qing permitted the sound to come out. Su Qing didn't care exactly what it was trying to say. He just looked at the hand and calmly said, "Play the music." He backed up the command with a blast of God perception. This time, the addition of the golden crow resulted in the hand's struggles growing weaker. Next, Su Qing completely enveloped the hand with God perception. The eye in the palm closed. Blood oozed out of the severed part of the hand, swirling around until it formed a shadowy figure. It was a woman. She wore a white robe and had her head bowed so that her facial features weren't possible to make out. In her arms she held a zither with its strings severed. The only part that was crystal clear was the right hand, the fingers of which were moving rapidly over the formless zither. Music drifted out. Natural sounds welcomed the moon. It was the real version of the song. Back when Su Qing changed the howling into the real natural sounds welcome the moon, it was like this. But this version was different substructurally. On the surface, dawn was coming, and the darkness of night was disappearing. Normally speaking, sunlight should have been spreading. But strangely, it was late. Deep down on the seafloor, as the musician played her music, waves kicked up on the surface of the forbidden sea. It was almost as if something was about to emerge from the water. Eventually, an illusory rotting moon appeared. She rose from the seafloor, broke the surface of the water, and in the moment that the sun should have risen, replaced the sun to shine down on all living things. It looked as if the face of the young woman would soon open her eyes. Unfortunately, the moon that would normally have ascended into revered ancients' canopy of heaven upon the playing of natural sounds welcome the moon had long since perished. That moon only existed in times past, and the version here was just a projection. She could not truly rise into the sky. This moon would eventually disappear as surely as a popped bubble. The eyes that opened would eventually close. Before it disappeared, though, a soft voice echoed out, speaking to the sun that was about to rise. "Brother." "Tu." The voice echoed out of time and into the forbidden sea, and was carried by the sea breeze to the outer sea. In the inky waters of the outer sea, where the seafloor was much more terrifying than the inner sea, there was a giant slowly walking forward. Its footsteps thumped loudly through the water. It had a corroded chain draped over its shoulder, on the other end of which was a run-down bronze chariot. The chariot suddenly trembled and stopped moving, and no matter how the giant pulled it, it wouldn't budge. Inside the chariot was carved the golden crow's magic, which currently glittered with shining light. The magical symbols rippled and flowed, eventually turning into a golden crow. The crow's eyes opened and shifted to look toward the inner sea. Eventually, the crow faded away. As for the giant, it shifted directions. Instead of continuing into the depths of the outer sea to find a sleeping spot, it started dragging the bronze dragon chariot toward the inner sea. As it moved, huge waves rolled out over the surface of the sea, carrying with them the sound of breathing. The breathing echoed into the inner sea. Su Qing sat cross-legged on the seafloor, meditating. In front of him was the severed hand embodied as the musician, still playing natural sounds welcome the moon. The music was elegant and soul-stirring. As Su Qing listened, he could sense that his godly authority of sound was more dazzling than ever. At the same time, he felt a sensation of regret within the music as the rotting moon faded away. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, more than half a month went by. During those 20 days, Su Qing remained in place on the seafloor. Natural sounds welcome the moon didn't play continuously. Instead, the music drifted out every day when the sun set. It happened over and over again. Eventually, Su Qing could sense that the water was changing. It was colder than before, and the currents were stronger. It seemed like some colossal entity was approaching. When that happened, he knew that he had succeeded. The bronze dragon chariot was approaching from some unknown direction. Su Qing kept waiting patiently. In contrast, Little Shadow was getting very anxious. When the god vine showed up, it sensed danger. When the broken hand showed up, that sensation grew more intense. Therefore, it took the initiative to emit some crunching sounds during the daytime whenever natural sounds welcome the moon wasn't playing. 7 more days passed. As the temperature dropped and the waves grew bigger, organizations that operated in the area could sense that something was happening. For safety's sake, most of them refrained from going out onto the open sea. And yet, there are some types of danger that will come whether or not you try to avoid them. There was a species called the sea spirits who lived on a specific island in the Forbidden Sea. They had a population of only a few thousand, which meant that they had no other option than to be a subsidiary species to one of the larger species on one of the larger islands. At the moment, the fire of catastrophe was burning on their island. The fire was red. Blood stained the ancestral land of their species. Corpses of their species were piled everywhere. They included men and women, old and young. There were even newborn infants among them. All were dead. The son of floating fiend from the vivifying holy land sat on a stone hut, enjoying the scent of blood in the air. "Smells lovely," he said. His 9 Tao protectors were currently extracting the hearts from all the corpses. Sea spirit hearts came in the form of a type of crystal. The Vivifiants had marked that crystal as an excellent material, and a few thousand would be worth quite a hefty sum. Before long, the crystals had all been collected. Fire raged, and the entire area crumbled into ash. No evidence was left behind. Floating Fiend's son stood, took out a map to check where the next set of materials could be obtained. That was when his palm suddenly flickered. He looked at it, and his eyes flashed aggressively, all while a smile broke out on his face. "That fast? I already found the killer? Well, let's go take a look. I'm curious what he looks like." Floating Fiend's son smiled, stood, and headed over the horizon. His 9 Tao protectors followed wordlessly. The wind grew stronger. Chapter 976. I changed my mind. The wind blew from the outer sea. The current came from the same direction, causing waves to roll to the inner sea. A giant strode expressionlessly across the seafloor. Every step caused massive ripples to spread out in all directions. Even huge undersea mountains posed no obstacle. Wherever it went, everything was crushed. Behind it, the bronze dragon chariot was similarly unstoppable. The giant was getting closer and closer to Su Qing. It emanated terrifying pressure and a shocking aura. Except it wasn't detectable by just anyone. Only someone connected to it by karma would be able to. Little Shadow trembled, but the god vine didn't look any different compared to usual. Su Qing opened his eyes and turned to look off into the distance. He had sensed the aura of the dragon chariot. He already had some ideas of how to get onto the chariot and have it fly along the same route that the golden crow had once taken through the sky. He had analyzed each possibility thoroughly, and was ready to adjust his actions in an instant to improve his chances of success. At this point, he felt that his chances of success were at about 70% or higher. However, this was the Golden Crow's Dragon Chariot plus, the giant pulling it was extremely terrifying, as he had personally experienced. Granted, his fleshly body was very powerful now, but he still wasn't going to take the giant lightly. For the better part of the month that had passed, he had been making preparations on the seafloor. Now all he needed to do was wait for the giant to appear. That said, to ensure everything goes smoothly, I should get rid of any prying eyes before the chariot arrives. Looking away from the direction of the chariot, he lifted his right hand and pointed out with his finger. The water about 3,000 meters away suddenly exploded with sound. At the same time, a powerful backlash attack built up in the same area. A tempest erupted, causing huge waves to break out on the surface. A domineering aura rose up, filled with disdain as it rushed toward Su Qing. Water raged everywhere, along with a deafening roar as a furious sea dragon appeared. In the blink of an eye, it was about to slam into Su Qing. Su Qing's expression was the same as ever, and in fact, he didn't even look at the sea dragon. He just flicked his finger. "Screw off," he said. A majestic might filled the area for 3,000 meters around him. It became a mountain-toppling, sea-draining force, accompanied by countless evil ghosts, all of them releasing ear-piercing howls. An explosion of sound swept out in all directions. The sea dragon was hit first, and it exploded, revealing 4 individuals within. A few hundred meters behind Su Qing, the water seethed as an additional 3 figures were forced out into the open. To his left, about 1,500 meters away, the water shattered and 2 attackers were revealed. A total of 9 figures were now out in the open, all of them glaring at Su Qing as they pulsed with smoldering god cultivation-based power. Their eyes were cold, but after their gazes locked onto him, odd expressions overtook their faces. Then they exchanged glances as they apparently realized who Su Qing was. That was when the sound of clapping could be heard from off in the distance. "Excellent. So you really were able to kill our scouts? Your setup here is very interesting, as is that severed hand. Could it be that you're on a fishing expedition? You know, you look somewhat familiar. I feel like I've seen you in the jade slips back home." Another person appeared some 3,000 meters away. He was none other than the son of Floating Fiend. Instead of personally approaching, he had sent his Tao protectors to get close. Now he was looking at Su Qing with a curious look in his eyes. Su Qing took it all in without the tiniest change to his facial expression. He actually wasn't surprised at all. He just looked coldly at the young man off in the distance. He knew immediately that these were cultivators from the vivifiant Holy Land. He didn't have a good impression of their Holy Land, but given that there was tenuous peace with them, he simply said, "You have 3 breaths of time to leave this place." 3 breaths of time? Floating Fiend's son looked at him with glittering eyes. He really did recognize Su Qing. If he was dealing with any other human, he wouldn't have hesitated. He would have killed them immediately. But because of who Su Qing was, he did hesitate. It was the same with the 9 Tao protectors. They all had read reports with descriptions of Su Qing, and thus they didn't make any moves. If they did make a move, it would be a big deal, and it would be a violation of the orders governing their species. The young man studied Su Qing for a moment, then turned to leave. He was a silk pants, but he also knew that there were some things that even he would be punished for doing. However, just before leaving, he seemed to notice something. His gaze shifted from Su Qing's face to his fleshly body. Then his nose twitched and his eyes widened. He even started breathing a bit more heavily. "Smells lovely. That body of yours." The young man looked visibly moved. It wasn't just him. The cultivators Su Qing had forced out into the open were also looking at him with surprised facial expressions. Some of them even licked their lips greedily. "That's the aroma of immortal mercury. And it's mixed with the flesh of a god." "What level of god, though?" "Hold on, there are also cultivator lineaments in addition to the godly aura." The young man's heart was racing. As a vivifiant, he had been stealing the organs and fleshly bodies from other species to graft onto himself since he was very young. That practice affected the vivifiant life force, substructure, and cultivation base. That was the foundation of their entire species. And Su Qing's body was something he had never seen the likes of before. In fact, their entire species had never seen anything like it, whether in the Holy Lands or revered ancient, not even in historical records. It surpassed anything imaginable. At the same time, the young man felt an instinct from his innate ability, filling him with intense longing. That longing was like an unstoppable hunger that overtook his mind and told him that he absolutely had to have that body. The 9 Tao protectors were experiencing a similar reaction. They literally couldn't stop from breathing heavily and staring fixedly at Su Qing, as if they wanted to eat him alive. But then Floating Fiend's son narrowed his eyes and managed to suppress his greed. He smiled. "I didn't realize it was you here, Region Lord Su. Sorry to bother you. We'll leave now." Licking his lips, he shot a glance at his Tao protectors, then backed away. Their real plan was to search the surroundings to confirm that Su Qing was actually alone, then send a message back to their holy land to ask for further instructions. Unfortunately for them, Su Qing was no fool, and could tell what was on their mind. Today was going to involve some killing. Eyes turning cold, he said, "I changed my mind." And then sound exploded. Chapter 977. 500 kilometers of hell. Su Qing's voice swept out across the seafloor. The noise of the sea current echoed in all directions. There was also the sound of fish swimming nearby, and the cry of the sea beasts in the depths. The heartbeats of Floating Fiend's son and his 9 Tao protectors, as well as the sound of the blood pumping through their veins, all mixed together. Combined with natural sounds, Welcome the Moon being played by the severed hand, it created an astonishing tune that surged everywhere. Where it went, it killed in Gruish fashion. Terrifying power caused the water to seethe violently. Mountain-toppling, sea-draining force crushed down on everything. Floating Fiend's son and his Tao protectors were astonished, and immediately tapped into their divine abilities. In an instant, their flesh expanded and they grew larger. That was their innate ability, in which they could take the flesh and blood of all the other species they had stolen in their lives and unleash it at the same time. It was like something that a freakish monster would do, and indeed they looked like freakish monsters. That was how they attempted to fight back against the tempest created by Su Qing's godly authority of sound. Intense rumbling could be heard as the power of sound crushed everything in its path. The Vivifiants were sent tumbling as a huge vortex formed. It was a 500-kilometer vortex that sealed and cut off the outside. From a distance, it was like a gigantic orb of sound. The sound outside of that area was being sucked in, causing the tempest inside to grow more intense. When Su Qing chose to kill, it happened no matter what. As the astonished Vivifiant cultivators fought back, Su Qing stood, his face completely expressionless. His eyes were cold, though. Within that 500-kilometer area, the Vivifiant cultivators were being assailed by the sound tempest, and they were completely visible to Su Qing via his god perception. This was his battleground. He had prepared this to use on the giant, but the giant had not yet arrived, so the Vivifiants got to experience it first. Su Qing hadn't planned to do any killing, but the Vivifiants clearly had malicious intentions, and therefore, according to the principles Su Qing lived by, they had to die. As the sound authority raged, Su Qing walked forward. He stepped into the sound, disappeared, and then reappeared. Within the sound, right in front of one of the Tao protectors. This individual didn't look like a human at all. He was several dozen meters tall with 4 arms. He was extremely skinny with a very small head. What was really bizarre was that the skin on his chest was wriggling. He looked very monstrous. As he performed an incantation gesture, he pulsed with intense energy and blood, which caused his chest to wriggle even more violently. Unexpectedly, as he backed up, he sucked in the sound around him. This vivifiant was extraordinary. Although, to be more precise, it was his heart that was extraordinary, as it could devour sound. The moment Su Qing appeared in front of him, he realized it. Looking up, he lunged at Su Qing with all four of his arms. The only thing waiting for him was a cold snort. The sound of it exploded in all directions, becoming the power of sound authority. It surrounded the cultivator, making a smaller sound orb within the huge 500-kilometer sound orb. Within it, wild fluctuations erupted as sounds clashed with each other, creating a resonance that caused the vivifiant's face to fall. When the critical moment arrived, he didn't say a word. 3 major worlds appeared around him. At the same time, his chest split open to reveal a pure white heart. The heart was covered with ancient symbols, and as soon as it was in the open, it turned into a vortex that violently sucked in all of the nearby sound. At the same time, a devilish will swept out. It was an extraordinary heart called the Nine Wills Devil Heart, which came from a very mysterious species that lived out in the starry sky. Members of the species were born as nascent soul cultivators, and when they grew up, they reached the peak of smoldering God. Years ago, this vivifiant cultivator expended immense effort to get this heart. As a result, he was able to quickly rise to prominence in the vivifiant Holy Land. He had started out as a commoner, but now here he was, Tao Protector to Floating Fiend's son. Knowing it was a life or death moment, he wasn't holding anything back, and was tapping into the power of the heart to try to turn things around. However, despite the heart being extraordinary, he was facing Su Qing, who was even more extraordinary. That was especially true considering that this battlefield had been specially prepared by Su Qing to deal with the giant and the dragon chariot. He had hidden a lot of sound in the area, and now he was using it to terrifying and deadly effect. And more sound was being added into the mix every moment. The extraordinary heart only lasted an instant before it couldn't sustain so much sound. After trembling in resonance with the sound orb, it shattered. A scream rang out, the sound of which became a sound that slashed through the vivifiant cultivator. Blood sprayed as he was killed in body and soul. Su Qing, in the form of the golden crow, flew out of the crumbling sound orb. The golden crow shimmered and turned into a black spear, which then shot toward the next vivifiant cultivator. It was a movement that couldn't truly be described in terms of speed. Wherever sound was, he could appear. Something like that was perfectly suited to slaughter. The spear pierced through the air to appear in front of the second vivifiant and stab viciously toward him. Strength of cultivation base was only a foundational requirement to be a Tao Protector of the Son of Floating Fiend. More importantly was potential. These so-called Tao Protectors were expected to do more than just keep Floating Fiend's son safe. Their mission was to grow along with him. According to the ranking system in their species, after Floating Fiend became an imperial sovereign, his son would become a junior chief. The Tao Protectors were supposed to accompany him on his path to becoming the actual chief. In other words, he was to eventually be the leader of the whole species. That was why, though the first Tao Protector only had 3 worlds to Su Qing, he felt more like someone at the peak of 4 worlds. In many respects, their status and position was vastly higher than the 2 scouts from their species that Su Qing had killed earlier. The scouts sent to revered ancient by the Holy Lands could vary greatly in strength depending on the Holy Land they came from. This Tao Protector was clearly no simpleton. As the spear approached, his eyes shone brightly. Ignoring the injuries being inflicted to him by the deadly sound around him, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture. In the blink of an eye, he vanished. He had merged with the surrounding water. The fleshly body he was using came from a species in the starry sky that lived mostly in the water. He hadn't merged with the water before because he wanted to keep that ability as a trump card to use in a critical moment. Seeing that Su Qing was trying to kill him, he didn't hesitate to use that ability. The sea around him suddenly surged with a tide flow power that knocked the spear down. Then what remained of the power formed restraints that bound it in place. Next, he cast his senses out to notify the other Tao Protectors via divine will. Lord of a region? So what? At the same time, the other vivifiant cultivators were taking actions to fight back against the sound and hopefully free themselves. Though their attempts were extraordinary, they were all injured in various ways. However, the son of Floating Fiend was the child of a quasi-imperial sovereign, and thus, his methods were different from all the others. At a critical moment he unleashed the Grand Emperor treasure in his right palm that could stitch karma. It turned into a blood-red streak that zipped around him. It could stitch karma, amend fate, and determine the movement of the sound. Authority. It could cause magical laws to appear and bring natural laws. At the same time, combined with the signal being sent out by the Tao Protector who had merged with the sea, it could point right towards Su Qing. If sound were likened to ice, then this needle was like lava. Where it went, the sound authority had to retreat. Follow the needle to Su Qing and kill him. As his orders echoed out, the needle glowed red and shot towards Su Qing's location. The Vivifiants who had previously scattered all sensed it, and followed the path of the needle to also get close to Su Qing. However, even as they were following that track, the Tao Protector who had merged with the water was stunned to find that although his tide flow power had locked down the black spear, that spear disappeared. Then Su Qing appeared as if nothing had ever happened. The tide flow seemed like nothing more than a gentle breeze that stirred his hair a bit. It didn't do anything to his fleshly body. He was unable to do anything to stop Su Qing from walking right up to where he was merged with the water. And before he could retreat, Su Qing's sound authority erupted. A boom echoed out as the water in that spot was wiped out of existence. He had fused and would never unfuse. He was dead, interred in the water, and to some extent that was like a return. A boom echoed out as Su Qing moved on. At that same moment, misfortune spread into the 500-kilometer area, combining with the sound authority to produce gruish results. When the other Tao Protectors sensed what had happened, they were shocked. The slaughter continued. The death of the second Tao Protector bolstered the sound authority. A few dozen kilometers away was the third Tao Protector. Even as he heard what happened, a host of innumerable soul threads appeared to him. They formed into a major world that rumbled right toward him. Though astonished, he didn't hesitate to act. A host of bumps appeared all over him, and then started exploding, releasing numerous black beetles. Astonishingly, his body was made of them. All of them scattered and headed in different directions. Seeing that, Su Qing's eyes gleamed quizzically. He was really learning a lot about vivifying cultivators thanks to this encounter. They were really a strange species. Su Qing's major world trembled, then collapsed, turning into 50 million soul threads that spread rapidly. Sound authority was the guide. Misfortune was the lock. And the soul threads gave chase to deliver the mortal blow. The result was foreordained, and thus Su Qing turned to look in a different direction. For the most part, the surviving Tao Protectors had met up with their lord. There was only one who was alone, and Su Qing was looking in his direction. Seemed like he was on his own intentionally. Eyes narrowing, Su Qing took a step forward and vanished. When he reappeared, he could see the lone Tao Protector. The Tao Protector apparently noticed, and turned to face him. As he did so, he transformed. In an instant he came to look exactly like Su Qing. It wasn't just his physical appearance. His aura, his karma, his fate, and everything else about him changed. "I've been waiting for you for a long time now," the Tao Protector said coldly. "Your fate and your karma are now connected to me. Going forward, whatever injuries I sustain, you sustain. If I die, you die." Su Qing didn't say a word in response. He just shook his head. He stepped forward and launched a fist strike that combined the undying Emperor's fist and within the 9 springs. A boom rang out. The Tao Protector didn't try to avoid the blow. He let it hit him, and then stumbled backward with blood spraying out of his mouth. His expression was cold as he looked at Su Qing. This move of his had never failed in all the many years he used it. And yet Su Qing launched a second blow. The water raged. More blood sprayed dramatically out of the Tao Protector's mouth, and he tumbled backward completely out of control. And Su Qing was striding toward him like a war god, seemingly unfazed in any way. Finally, his face fell. He now realized that this terrifying enemy's blows were indeed hitting both of them. And yet, although his organs were in great pain, his opponent hardly seemed affected at all. Nothing like this had ever happened. The previously supremely confident Tao Protector now backed up in shock. Sadly for him, it was too late. Su Qing appeared in front of him and launched another punch, then another and another. In a very short period of time he launched 9 fist strikes. Being struck by the 9 blows caused the Tao Protector's body to simply explode. With a boom he was destroyed in body and soul. An instant later his body formed anew, a result of the years of unleashing karmic links. But then the golden crow ate him. Very neat and tidy, Su Qing stood there. "You can't handle my karma," he said coolly. Meanwhile shrill screams echoed out in the sound orb. The screams came from the countless beetles from the third Tao Protector. They had been unable to evade the innumerable soul threads. The soul threads devoured them. "Very neat and tidy. Only a few more," Su Qing murmured, his eyes cold as he took a step forward. The violet moon rose within the 500-kilometer sound orb. Violet moonlight carried killing intent as it shone down. Everything started to get colder. Taboo poison spread, forming something like a huge eye. The eye opened. It was Hellfie's eye, and it was looking out at the hell that was the 500-kilometer area on the seafloor. Chapter 978. Like a god descending into mortal dust. Su Qing had led a life in which he was no stranger to slaughter. In fact, it had been an instinct from childhood on. He lived in a world in which the weak were the prey of the strong, and he had encountered many instances of evil and brutality. If he wanted to keep on living, then he had to resort to slaughter, wipe out the evildoer, and the result was safety for oneself. The slums, the scavenger base camp, 7 Blood Eyes, Emperor Receiving Prefecture, Sea-Sealing County, Moonright Region, the imperial capital of humankind, Fire Moon Territory. That was the path he had walked. He wasn't even sure of how many people he had killed, and he had long since stopped using that bamboo slip. Perhaps it was only the cold wind formed by the bodies of the dead that remembered how many had fallen to him. And that wind was now blowing across the sea where Su Qing was. The wind was a dark current moving along the seafloor. It contained no sound, only death. For example, as the violet moon rose, its moonlight became a host of sharp blades that, by the time anyone noticed them, would have their weaknesses exposed to them. And then that person would die. The 6 surviving Tao Protectors clustered around the son of Floating Fiend were yet again shaken to the core. Moonlight shimmered around them, shattering the seawater, slicing the void, and bringing raging coldness. At the same time, taboo poison swelled, filling the water with mutagen and turning into an ambassador of death that could wipe out all life. All living beings were cursed as 500 kilometers of seafloor turned into hell itself. And thus, the moon sought. The poison invaded. All of the Tao Protectors could sense the moonlight rumbling within them, like sharp blades. It was a tempest to assail the soul, something that could strip away their memories and raise their life away. One of the Tao Protectors, a tall, burly man, suddenly screamed in agony as secrets he would never tell to anyone were illuminated by the moonlight and became his greatest weakness. His world became violet. And then the poison answered the call of the moon and exploded within him. In the blink of an eye, the screaming burly man's body melted into a bloody sludge. The other Vivifiant cultivators' faces fell as intense sensations of deadly crisis filled them. What was especially noteworthy was that the entire region had been sealed, cutting them off from the outside and making any calls for help useless. Add in the fact that 4 of them were already dead, and it was no surprise the survivors were in a daze. When they first spotted Su Qing earlier, they had believed that they could definitely kill him. But now, things had changed. However, they were all chosen cultivators, so despite the danger, their shock was only temporary, and was not very severe. That was especially true of Floating Fiend's son. He was a silk pants, but he always behaved in a way that was befitting of his status. Despite facing death and having already lost 4 Tao Protectors, the killing intent still boiled within him, and he was still thinking perfectly clearly. "This part of the sea is obviously home turf for him," he said, speaking out loud and not via projection. "Let's get out of here. Once we're free, we can report the matter to the Holy Land. At that point it wouldn't matter if he had an even higher status than he does. He made the first move, so killing him won't count as our Holy Land violating the agreement." He knew that Su Qing could hear him speak and in fact wanted him to hear. Along with his Tao Protectors, he began falling back at top speed. As he fled, He sent his Grand Emperor's needle out, not off into the distance but rather, to stitch the local karma together in a way to shatter the moonlight and destroy the taboo poison. What was more, if Su Qing showed up, he would know immediately. The 5 Tao protectors also unleashed various trump cards, activating precious organs and body parts, which they sent to converge around the needle. They were preparing a very comprehensive attack. In that manner, time passed. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, they had fled a few hundred kilometers. That was when the needle suddenly vibrated, then rotated to the right and shot off through the sea water. "Attack!" shouted Floating Fiend's son. He performed an incantation gesture and pointed out, whereupon the third eye in his forehead opened. A red beam of light shot out, piercing through the water to follow the needle. Meanwhile, the 5 Tao protectors all unhesitatingly unleashed attacks. Taking in the scene as a whole, the 5 Tao protectors' energy surged, creating a destructive tempest around them. Within that tempest, it was possible to see a huge salamander as well as a gigantic hand shaped like a body. Another was even more gruish, as it was a bloody spear made of flesh. They all looked different but all were terrifyingly deadly. 1. The combined attack made the target area explode, destroying the water and leaving behind nothing but a void. Penetrating fluctuations rolled out in all directions. The shock waves created by the divine abilities obscured the area, making it impossible to see what happened. But the Grand Emperor's needle was returning. On its tip was a drop of blood. When Floating Fiend's son saw the blood, his eyes glittered. After scanning it to make sure it was safe, he tossed it to one of his Tao protectors. "Use that blood for the curse." The Tao protector didn't hesitate to take the blood and perform a one-handed incantation gesture. Several major worlds then appeared behind him, within which all of the living beings responded to the will of the world's lord. Dropping to their knees, they kowtowed, sending out their wills to form a curse. "I curse your body, severing life force. I curse your soul, shattering your spirit. I curse your essence, destroying you in body and soul." Countless voices echoed back and forth, whereupon the drop of blood started vibrating. It turned black as if it was being cursed, and at the same time was affecting the flesh and blood that was its origin. But then the Tao protector casting the curse suddenly twitched. His face distorted, and his eyes went wide with unprecedented terror and astonishment. His eyes exploded. A shrill scream echoed out, and then he shouted out in a trembling voice full of abject terror, "This blood's origin. It's..." Before he could finish speaking, his shivering body turned pitch black as if he was being invaded by mutagen, or perhaps had observed something he shouldn't have seen, or perhaps had cursed the origin of his own curse. His body went limp and he exploded. His life force had been severed. His soul had shattered. He had been destroyed in body and soul. It was clearly a backlash, and it struck fear into the hearts of the others. Even the most unshakable will was now trembling. The things that had happened one after another left the survivors with the gruish sensation that they were facing a god. All of that raged out of control after the cultivator, who had been cursing Su Qing, suddenly died. Simultaneously, 7 lamps lit up in the dark water. It was the 7 lamps underworld fire curse. They were like the eyes of underworld deities, glaring at the vivifiants. The 7 lamps flickered, then went out one by one. The 4 Tao protectors had it better off. Their minds reeled, nothing more. But Floating Fiend's son reacted with visible surprise. A sensation of impending death swept through him like a furious wave. In that critical moment, he didn't hesitate at all to spit up a huge mouthful of blood, and then unleash the Grand Emperor's needle. In doing so, he linked his karma and fate with the Tao protector next to him. Instantly, the sensation of impending death vanished from within him. As for the Tao protector, he lunged to the side as the curse of the 7 lamps exploded within him. His major world was forced open, and moonlight entered his heart, searching for the weaknesses in his soul. Then taboo poison went wild. He died in agony. His death caused the bell of terror to toll. As a result, Floating Fiend's son and the remaining 3 Tao protectors lost their will to fight. They were afraid. They had faced many powerful enemies throughout their lives, whether it was in other holy lands, or among the species to be found in the starry sky. They were no strangers to slaughter. But this was their first time encountering the gruish type of slaughter they were seeing play out in front of them. Killing with sound was inherently terrifying. Then came killing with moonlight, killing with taboo poison, killing with a curse backlash, and then killing with underworld fire. From beginning to end, they had only seen Su Qing in their initial encounter. After that, they hadn't laid eyes on him even once. Just like that, 6 of their number perished. In the blink of an eye, they all unleashed every scrap of speed they could muster to flee. But then, the water behind them flickered as the 7 underworld lamps appeared again. The lamps immediately started going out. Floating Fiend's son gritted his teeth, lifted his right hand, and threw out a hand sign. The hand sign had no power. Instead, it was some sort of command. Vivifying Tao protectors had to swear a will oath that they wouldn't hesitate to substitute their own life to perish instead of the one they protected. The order Floating Fiend's son had just given activated that oath. The 3 Tao protectors grimly halted in place. Eyes flashing with determination, they spun in place and raced backward toward the 7 lamps. Floating Fiend's son felt pain in his heart. Those 9 Tao protectors were from his own bloodline, and had accompanied him for many years. But now 6 had been cut down by Su Qing, and the other 3 seemed to be about to suffer the same fate. Su Qing, I'm going to make you pay for this 10,000 times over. Floating Fiend's son felt regret rage, which ultimately caused him to scream inside. Behind him, 7 lamps were extinguished and a Tao protector perished. Next came draconic roaring as 9 dawns appeared. The anti-mage body formed, combining with taboo poison and moonlight. Su Qing burst into motion, and another cultivator fell. Half an incense stick of time passed. Floating Fiend's son was approaching the border of the 500-kilometer hell. His eyes were crimson and he was completely bedraggled. As he sent his needle out to combat the moonlight and the taboo poison, he frantically fled. The border got closer and closer. His hope grew stronger and stronger. He was confident that once he got past that border, he would be able to use his needle to break through the seal and escape. Once in the outside world, he would send a message to the Holy Land, whereupon his father or the other patriarch would arrive in an instant. He pushed himself to go even faster. However, when he was only about 3,000 meters from the border, a voice echoed into his ears. "You're all that's left now." Along with the voice appeared a figure in a violet robe, with long violet hair. He was as beautiful as an immortal but cold and grim. He carried a severed head in his hand as he strode into the field of view of Floating Fiend's son. The currents swept up around him, carrying with them the power over death. It made this newcomer seem like an actual god of death. Floating Fiend's son was struck deeply in his heart and mind. He stopped in place. Chapter 979. A sword falls, crushing soul and dispersing body. Su Qing stood there as if personally demarcating the border between life and death. He was positioned between Floating Fiend's son and death itself, becoming his whole world, and blocking him off from any hope. Floating Fiend's son felt his heart pounding in his chest. It was as if a boulder had fallen from heaven into the sea of his heart, sending out massive waves. That was especially true considering that the severed head Su Qing held had not closed its eyes in death. They pulsed with a deathly aura as they stared out, as if to gaze upon death itself. Even more terrifying was the god vine that swirled around Su Qing. The vine pulsed with starlight, which combined with the violet glow of Su Qing to make something even more godly. Then there was the shadow that seemed to merge with the water itself. As it gathered behind Su Qing, it eventually stood up to form a blurry tree. Upon the tree hung a coffin which swayed back and forth. And there were also numerous eyes that stared with bloodthirsty gluttony at the son of Floating Fiend. All of that made the seafloor gruish to the extreme. Then there was the godly authority flickering everywhere. Sound was under his control. The moon was his servant. The poison had him as its source. And misfortune affected everything except Su Qing himself. It made Su Qing seem like a god descending into mortal dust. Razor-sharp moonlight swept toward Floating Fiend's son from all directions. It was accompanied by the invasive taboo poison, like marrow-filling bones. It was the same with the sound. The god vine behind Su Qing swirled toward Floating Fiend's son at top speed. Little Shadow, unwilling to be outdone or left behind, spread out dramatically. Everything there on the seafloor converged on the enemy. In front of Su Qing, The 7 underworld lamps flickered on the verge of going out. Floating Fiend's son felt overwhelmed with bitterness. In the end, he didn't speak. And that was because the sound of his own voice could be used as a weapon by his enemy. Besides, nothing he said at this point would make any difference. Threats weren't going to do anything. Pleas for mercy would be ineffective. All of this had been foreordained the moment this person said that he had changed his mind. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that all of the karma that was created from the moment he made a mistake in judging his opponent's battle prowess made this result unavoidable. As his heart sank, his eyes filled with intense battle spirit, and his heart burned with the desire to live. Fighting was his only chance to live. Going all out was his only hope. Therefore, rumbling sounds rose up as he unhesitatingly ignited his soul, his cultivation base, and his fleshly body. He even started burning his essence and bloodline. As a member of the Vivifian nobility, his bloodline was far purer than ordinary members of his species. At the same time, he had a very extraordinary fleshly body. His father had paid an enormous price to make sure he had it. Now all that was becoming kindling. Silver fire broke out all over him, incinerating the surrounding water and incinerating his madness. At the same time, his battle prowess spiked. Previously, he was a 2-world smoldering god who could unleash 4-world battle prowess. But this burning process caused his battle prowess to leap to a much higher level and break past his personal limit. A terrifying aura erupted within him, mixing with the silver-colored fire to create a pressure that instantly weighed down on the heart and mind. It was the power of a 5-world smoldering god. The difference between 4 worlds and 5 might seem like a minor jump in levels, but the reality was that it was massive in terms of substructure. 5 worlds was actually the first major threshold of smoldering gods. Before 5 worlds, what was smoldering was a will of gestation. After reaching 5 worlds, what was smoldering was a will of growth. What gestated and then grew for these gods was not something related to actual gods. Instead, it was one's soul, which was being elevated to become a nascent divinity. When the nascent divinity emerged, it primarily governed natural and magical laws. 1. Within that 500-kilometer area at the seafloor, a terrifying aura was building up on Floating Fiend's son. His fleshly body was withering dramatically, and on top of it was a semi-transparent nascent divinity body. The nascent divinity's eyes were glittering and bright, and its body was magnificent. To a certain degree, it looked even more impressive than Su Qing. The god vine, which had been wrapping around Floating Fiend's son, had no choice but to back away. Even Little Shadow fell back. The needle glittered brightly as it circled in the area, blocking the godly authority. At the same time, Floating Fiend's son extended the arm of his nascent divinity and pointed at Su Qing. That gesture sucked in numerous natural and magical laws, making them like threads that shot towards Su Qing to wrap him up, seal him, and lock him down. It was as if the finger could treat all Taoists as enemies, all immortals as adversaries, and all cultivators as rebels. In an instant, 5-world smoldering god battle prowess surged with mountain-toppling, sea-draining force towards Su Qing. What met it head-on was the 7 lamps underworld fire curse. In the blink of an eye, the flames were extinguished, but they didn't bring death. Instead, they just collapsed. They couldn't block the natural and magical laws from that finger. Thus, the laws became a tempest that instantly swept over Su Qing, covering him. Rumbling sounds echoed out. There was no longer a lack of sound. At last, a cold voice spoke out like sounds of nature, surpassing all other living things. Backtracing. As the word echoed out, an enormous sundial appeared within the tempest of laws. As it hung in midair, it let the threads of law pass by it, and seemed completely unaffected. The gnomon on the sundial was spinning backward. It started out slow, but after only a few breaths of time it sped up. Astonishingly, time in the area was now moving backward. The water flowed backward. The tempest retreated. Floating Fiend's son shook from head to toe as the natural and magical laws from his nascent divinity faded away, and his nascent divinity body collapsed. In the briefest of moments, it disappeared without a trace. At the same time, the withered flesh of his body started recovering. Everything was going back to the moment before he ignited himself. That was when he was a 4-world smoldering god, not a 5-world one. Floating Fiend's son was flabbergasted by what he was seeing. His face fell, and immediately prepared to ignite himself again. Except then, Su Qing appeared on the sundial, radiating boundless light. It was as if it had turned into a sun, illuminating everything in the area. And all of that light turned into a binding force. It shot toward Floating Fiend's sun. Wherever it went, it destroyed darkness, smashed the air and devastated everything. It was Su Qing's profound sun immortal light. It was as domineering as a sun and brought a tribulation of immortal might. It reached Floating Fiend's sun in an instant. He couldn't stop himself from screaming out in terror, despair, and pain. His fleshly body was instantly mangled so badly it was hardly recognizable, and was clearly on the verge of being completely wiped out by the immortal light. At that critical moment, Floating Fiend's sun felt a madness that turned into howl that hardly sounded like it came from the mouth of a sentient being. Come to me, immortal skill. Immortal skills were a creation from ancient Emperor Dark Serenity's time, and were also considered forbidden magics. In revered ancient, they were largely lost, and those that did survive were fragmented. But clearly, the Holy Lands had a lot of immortal skills. As Floating Fiend's sun howled, the Grand Emperor's needle shone with dazzling light and began spinning around him rapidly, leaving a red thread behind it that created various shadowy forms. They looked like souls. In fact, they were the 9 Tao protectors that Su Qing had cut down earlier. Specifically, they weren't actually souls, but rather they were karma. The needle was stitching together the karma of the 9 deceased individuals, then linking them together. After it was done, the needle shot into the forehead of Floating Fiend's sun. In an instant, the wounds covering Floating Fiend's sun ceased to worsen, and yet again silver flames covered him. He began burning again. He was fighting back against Su Qing's immortal light. Next, his nascent divinity appeared again, and the immortal light began to dim. Floating Fiend's sun had survived a moment of near death, and was now powering up again. With a vicious facial expression, he looked at Su Qing. My smoldering god cultivation base has been permanently weakened to use this magic. I refuse to believe that it won't affect you. The light of his nascent divinity erupted, reaching a height of some 3,000 meters, and sending waves out over the forbidden sea that were even more majestic than before. Then he once again took a hand that could control natural and magical laws, and thrust it toward Su Qing. The dazzling power of that strike surpassed anything from before. Great vibrations filled the seafloor. This time he wasn't just burning his bloodline. He was adding in the karma of the 9 Tao protectors, as well as their fate. To a certain extent, he was burning their future. In that manner, he was able to temporarily gain power equivalent to a 5-world smoldering god. Thanks to the stability provided by the Grand Emperor's needle, it would be very difficult to reverse time on him now. This was his final move. Howling, he sent the huge hand shooting toward Su Qing. At the same time, the air around him seemed to fill with sealing power, making it impossible for him to flee. Su Qing looked as calm as ever as he looked at the forehead of Floating Fiend's sun, where the needle had entered. That's a very interesting needle. Then he didn't do anything to dodge or evade, and just let the nascent divinity's hand hit his head. A huge boom rang out, but Su Qing stood there unmoving. Floating Fiend's sun stood agape, his mind spinning, his heart filled with incredulity. What's that? Yet again he unleashed the power of his nascent divinity, giving the attack everything he could muster, filling it with natural and magical laws. Rumble! Su Qing just stood there. Without a word, Floating Fiend shot into motion, trying to circle around Su Qing, and keeping about 3,000 meters of distance between them. He knew that he couldn't keep up his current level of battle prowess. Su Qing's gruishness surpassed anything imaginable, to the point where he had never even heard of anything similar. At the moment, he didn't even want to think about what could be the reason for it. By now, his mind was overwhelmed with terror, despair, and shock. All he wanted to do was get away. Turning to look at him flee, Su Qing extended his right hand and pushed it out gently. It created a new boundary within the 500-kilometer area. That boundary was a well. The seawater inside became the well water. It was none other than fishing the moon in the well. Floating Fiend's sun lurched to a halt as all of his magical techniques, treasures, and everything else about him were reflected in the water. That included the Grand Emperor's needle. Around that time, His immobility caused the burning of his cultivation base to naturally cease. Su Qing pulled back his hand as if to fish something up out of the water. A needle flew out. When that was done, the rumble of a sword echoed out from within Su Qing. Sword light glimmered as a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering stream of sword energy swept through the forbidden sea. Fate shattered as it slashed toward the soul and fleshly body of floating fiend's son. The sword shattered his soul and shredded his body. The scream of the sword also became the authority of sound, devastating the battlefield. Floating fiend's son had been destroyed in body and soul. Having accomplished that, Su Qing looked back into the depths of the sea. After cleaning up the mess, he would go back to waiting for the giant and the dragon chariot. However, before he could go more than 3,000 meters, he stopped in place and looked over his shoulder. For the first time, a serious expression could be seen on his face, and his heart rate increased. It seemed that great danger was on the verge of arriving. He had just sensed a terrifying gaze locking onto him. It didn't come from the giant and the dragon chariot. Instead, it came from the vivifiant Holy Land, where Floating Fiend had been in seclusion for the past 100 years. A terrifying figure sat cross-legged in the vivifiant Holy Land, and his eyes had just opened. As a result, the sky outside of the Holy Land went dark. Endless black clouds churned, and the sea reacted violently, sending huge waves out everywhere. Boundless energy swept through the cosmos, causing natural laws to bow their heads and magical laws to prostrate. Surrounding islands trembled, and countless species on the Forbidden Sea were inexplicably shaken to the core with terror. As for the vivifiants in the Holy Land, their minds and hearts were spinning. The might of an imperial sovereign rose up, along with a voice that surpassed heavenly thunder. When it spoke, it contained a horrifying killing intent that rolled out over the Forbidden Sea. "You killed my son? I see you." Chapter 980. Imperial Sovereign Authority. It was a gaze that contained a mysterious power. The gaze of the broken face could invade heaven, earth, and the void. The gaze of gods could affect all living beings and entities. The gaze of an imperial sovereign could sever the ancient from the modern. When combined with the individual authority of a specific imperial sovereign, it could unleash strength akin to that of a god. After all, imperial sovereign was like a heavenly mountain in the system of cultivators. It was a sublime pinnacle. In the early part of that level, it was possible to fight with gods. Those at the peak were equivalent to the flawless god level. Although Floating Fiend was only in the early level, his arrival was still like that of a god. And now, Floating Fiend's gaze had its own unique authority, which caused Su Qing's head to spin, and filled his soul with a suffocating sensation. It was a type of suffocation that didn't just relate to his breathing. When it appeared in his soul, it was almost like a will of erasure. It was loneliness, darkness, and despair. Su Qing shivered from head to toe. All of the types of godly authority in his void soil, even the faint lineaments, began to flicker with bright light. And his fleshly body shone as if with mercury. His every asset fought back against the gaze, all while he fell back at top speed. He sent out his god perception, using sound to achieve speed similar to teleportation. At the same time, he took out Flame Phoenix's feather. His plan was to send a message. Unfortunately, that was when a cracking sound rang out. It was as if an extremely sharp and incomprehensibly domineering pair of shears had cut off his every connection to the outside world. Mind-spinning, Su Qing put the feather away and accelerated as he fled. In that private chamber in the vivifiant Holy Land, Floating Fiend himself sat there cross-legged with a dazzling pair of shears floating above his head. The shears seemed ancient, as if they had seen the passage of immense amounts of time. They pulsed with that sensation of age as well as a terrifying might. Floating Fiend slowly rose to his feet, ultimately standing to his full height of 300 meters. That action caused the cosmos to rumble, and great winds to sweep about. 100 years before, he who possessed royal vivifiant blood, and was at the peak of smoldering god, chose to go into a deadly session of seclusion in an attempt to break through to the level of imperial sovereign. The news quickly spread among all the terrestrial-level holy lands, and countless people paid very close attention to the matter. The reason was that imperial sovereigns were lords unto themselves. Those who succeeded in that breakthrough were as rare as phoenix feathers or Qilin horns. The vivifiant Holy Land was no exception. Among the terrestrial-level Holy Lands, the vivifiant Holy Land had been on the decline for a long time. For years, they had been relying on the fact that their patriarch was a peak imperial sovereign simply to stay afloat. On many occasions, they were backed into a corner and couldn't do anything. There was nothing more important to the Vivifiants than Floating Fiend and his session of secluded meditation. If he succeeded, then the Vivifiant Holy Land would rise to a higher level of prominence. If it weren't for the fact that the decree to come to Revered Ancient had been impossible for them to defy, they wouldn't have come at this time. Even though they were given no choice and came, the fact remained that Floating Fiend's session of meditation was still the most important thing to them. That was one reason why they hadn't done anything dramatic and hadn't caused any trouble for outsiders. What was more, Floating Fiend, who had been in meditation for 100 years, had no idea what was going on outside his meditation chamber. In past years, he had only been disturbed once, and that was to tell him that the Holy Lands had received orders to go to Revered Ancient. As for Revered Ancient itself, everything he knew about it was based on old information. As of now, the fluctuations of the death of his only blood-related child caused a reaction both physically and in terms of karma, shaking him out of his slumber. It was hard to say whether that was good or bad. It could be good because the reality was that it had actually been years since he stepped past the threshold leading into Imperial Sovereign. Unfortunately, his energy and might had been thrown into a state of primal chaos, as if he had been sent into reincarnation. Because of that continuous cycle, he couldn't wake up. It was something no one could help him with. He had to rely on himself to struggle through successfully. Only if he woke up could he successfully complete the breakthrough. It was something virtually all Imperial sovereigns had to deal with. It was also an experience that led to them forming their personal authority. That so-called authority was substructurally different from godly authority. Normally speaking, it was something exclusive to Imperial sovereigns, although it was possible, though rare, for certain spectacular chosen to do the same thing as a smoldering god. For some, the process of acquiring authority happened in an instant. In other cases it took 100 years or sometimes more than 1,000. Thus, when the fluctuations appeared, they tugged on him, provoking killing intent and fury in his blood. That, in turn, resonated with his authority and caused him to wake up. When it came to the bad parts, they were the fact that his son had died, and also that his authority had some flaws thanks to him waking up earlier. Regardless of anything, though, he was now an Imperial sovereign. Opening his eyes, he peered through the void, opened karma, and searched the sensations of the heart. As he had said, he saw Su Qing. He wasn't familiar with the outside location, but based on earlier information, he could tell that they had arrived at Revered Ancient. He didn't know the identity of the person who had killed his son, but he didn't need to. It didn't matter who the culprit was. As of this moment, he was dead set on killing him. That was the only way for him to repair his mental state and fix the flaw in his authority. It was related to his Tao. That was especially true considering that, though he had used the treasured shears that had once belonged to a grand emperor of his species to sever the culprit's connection to the outside, the culprit had already used some Gruish concealment technique to go into hiding. Therefore, Floating Fiend didn't hesitate at all to take a step forward. When his foot landed on the floor of his meditation chamber, ripples spread through heaven and earth, shaking all providence. He vanished. Because of the tug of the bloodline and the coordinates his gaze had locked onto, that single step was all it took to arrive within Su Qing's 500 kilometers of hell. His presence gave the natural laws a master, and made all magical laws servants. The heavenly Taoists of Revered Ancient were influenced by the will of Revered Ancient, and they resisted the Holy Lands which had left so long ago. However, an almighty Imperial sovereign would be welcomed in any location. After all, years ago, the heavenly Tao had been created to be in subjugation to cultivators. Therefore, when Floating Fiend arrived in the 500 kilometers of hell, the natural and magical laws acknowledged allegiance to him, and almost became an embodiment of his mind. His will became the will of heaven. His spirit became the spirit of heaven. If he wanted a location to be sealed, that location would instantly be sealed. If he wanted to exterminate Su Qing, then killing intent would erupt in Su Qing's area. The killing intent was a manifestation of the will of heaven, and that was controlled by Floating Fiend's thoughts. It was impossible to perceive. Countless streams of invisible killing intent gathered, But because of Floating Fiend's will, they became corporeal. In front of Su Qing appeared a bright red skeletal finger with 5 digits. The moment the finger appeared, everything around it seemed to solidify. Even thoughts were weighed down. The seawater no longer rippled. The only thing that could move was the killing intent. In an instant it weighed down on Su Qing, whose heart was racing as he fled at top speed, all while fused with the sound in the area. In that location the seawater exploded, heavenly will exploded, and killing intent exploded. Terrifying pressure and horrifying killing force bore down on Su Qing with unstoppable, unblockable momentum. Little Shadow wailed. The God Vine cracked. Moonlight shattered. Sound authority dimmed. 9 dawns. The grand dark heaven armor. Everything else was completely useless. The finger was like a foreordained doom as it descended upon Su Qing. Rumble. Every defense he had ceased to be functional. All divine abilities and magical techniques shattered. It was as if none of his assets were meaningful in any way. Mountain-toppling, sea-draining force raged through his soul and body with the intention of destroying and crushing it. He was to be destroyed in body and soul. Rumbling filled Su Qing as he was sent tumbling off to the side like a leaf in the wind. Yet he didn't collapse. As a result, Floating Fiend's eyes glittered. Oh, I see. Although Su Qing's body hadn't collapsed by the attack of an imperial sovereign's finger, he was coughing up mouthful after enormous mouthful of blood. Cracks spread out across his fleshly body, out of which seeped immortal mercury like fresh blood. The cracks weren't because of the imperial sovereign's finger. They had always existed within him, a result of the broken face's flesh, and had been held together by the immortal mercury. They were where the seals within Su Qing were located. The imperial sovereign's finger wasn't capable of destroying his fleshly body, but it was already showing it might be capable of doing something to the immortal mercury that was holding it together. Su Qing's body hadn't completely fused into one. That was why Master Seventh had told Su Qing that his fleshly body could defend against anything under the imperial sovereign level. As his body cracked apart, pain swept through him like a storm, overwhelming his senses and threatening to topple his mind. Su Qing trembled from head to toe as unimaginable torment filled him. But what really made his eyes go red was the splitting sensation in his soul. A feeling of deadly crisis rose up within him. However, Su Qing had been in a lot of potentially deadly situations in his life. He wasn't unfamiliar with circumstances like these, and he knew that in a moment like this he needed to stay clear-headed. Forcing himself to just endure the pain from his body and soul, he gritted his teeth and unleashed the godly authority of sound. Instantly, he merged into the sound and shot off into the distance. I need to get out of here and figure out a way to send a message. Unfortunately, an imperial sovereign had come in person. Even if Su Qing was stronger than he currently was, he would have limits. Therefore, though he fled within sound, as Floating Fiend's gaze descended, Floating Fiend's cold voice swept out. Erase. It was the power of Floating Fiend's authority. The words he spoke caused all sound within the 500-kilometer area to vanish. Those sounds weren't being taken away. They weren't being controlled. They were being erased. All sound ceased to exist. Because Su Qing was within the sound, if he didn't break free, he would also be erased. Therefore, he had no choice but to emerge from the sound. The moment he appeared, a huge bright red hand appeared over his head. The hand had 7 fingers with 5 digits each, and looked extremely gruish, like something straight out of the Yellow Springs. It covered the sky over Su Qing, becoming his world as it dropped down to grab him. Before it even landed, it created an intense pressure that caused more cracks to appear on Su Qing. Again, immortal mercury flowed like blood, and he felt more than ever like his body might collapse. His soul grew weak from the pressure, and the sensation of potential death became like a tidal wave crashing into him. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and his eyes became even more bloodshot. At that critical moment, his eyes gleamed with determination. Without any hesitation, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, and then swept his hands out in front of him. The fluctuations of detonation rose up within the 500-kilometer area. Su Qing had set up this area to deal with the giant and the dragon chariot, and had filled it with a large amount of God Source, which was intended to make his godly authority easier to use. But as the self-detonation fluctuations spread out, The entire 500 kilometers of hell noiselessly erupted. Areas throughout it where Su Qing had set up God Source began to explode one after another. There were hundreds of those areas, and every one that detonated added to the terrifying effect. After they all exploded, they created a shocking tempest with Su Qing in the middle. All of it shot toward that huge hand. Because of the authority of erasing, there was no sound in the area. But the tempest still contained violet moonlight and the power of taboo poison, which made the huge tempest even more dominant. It grew larger and larger, until it was like a godly volcano erupting on the seafloor, unleashing heaven-defying force that slammed into the imperial sovereign's hand. The hand faltered in midair. The tempest was resisting it. But imperial sovereigns were like gods, so no matter how grand that tempest was, it could only give it a moment's pause. In the end, the hand kept dropping. It slammed into the seafloor. The seafloor in the 500-kilometer area shattered as a huge crater opened up. However, the clash of the two types of power did a bit to ease the authority of erasure. And because of that, there was now a bit of sound present. It started minutely but quickly expanded. That was exactly what Su Qing wanted, sound. The moment the sound came to exist, he ignored his injuries and used the sound to shoot off into the distance. Blood sprayed out into the water. Immortal mercury flowed into the void. Wherever the sound went, it left behind a streak of red and silver. Within the sound, Su Qing was starting to lose consciousness, but he kept fleeing. The direction he was going led toward where he knew the approaching dragon chariot was. Far off in the Holy Tide region, in the region controlled by the garment folk, Ernyu lay snoring in a pile of colorful clothing. Each item of clothing was a woman's garment, and they were all clustered close to him. Clearly, the garment folk had been very welcoming, and he had made plenty of friends that he was close enough to that he could slumber alongside them. That one particular glove lay on his chest, the fingers all curled up. Suddenly, Ernyu shivered and opened his eyes. As he did, the surrounding pieces of clothing also woke up one after another, and floated up into the air. That included the glove. All of them were now floating in front of him as if asking if something was wrong. Ernyu shook his head. He looked confused. No, it's nothing. I just had a bad dream. In the dream, little Ah-Ching was trying to tell me something. Hun, what a weird dream. Upon hearing that, the articles of clothing flew back and forth in what seemed to be a comforting manner. You're right, Ernyu said. Maybe I've just been getting too exhausted lately. Are you going to keep massaging me? He licked his lips. All right, I guess I'll go back to sleep. You just keep up the massage. With that, Ernyu lay back down excitedly. An instant later, he sat back up. No way. I need to take a trip back to South Phoenix. It really feels to me like something big is happening. Are all of you going to miss me? Or will you come along? Chapter 981. Incoming Dragon Chariot. Outside of the continent of South Phoenix, in the depths of the Forbidden Sea, an enormous snake-shaped sea beast was pursuing its prey along the dark seafloor. Moving with astonishing speed, it opened its huge mouth and swallowed its prey whole. Then it let loose a howl of contentment. Its cry echoed out across the seafloor. Su Qing suddenly appeared out of that very sound. The moment he did, his body swelled up until he couldn't sustain the force, and he exploded. An instant later, the light of the ceiling mark within him glittered, and he was back, this time back as his normal size. Only after coughing up 7 or 8 mouthfuls of blood did he manage to stabilize himself. Expression grim, he looked down at his fleshly body. He was covered with cracks that oozed immortal mercury, which made him very horrid to behold. His soul was fractured and looked extremely weak through and through. As a result, Su Qing's vision was blurred. As he looked around, everything looked twisted and distorted. Given how deep he was at the bottom of the sea, those distortions looked like demonic monsters, grimacing and scowling at him. However, the weakness and dizziness only lasted for a moment before Su Qing suppressed it. The distortions also vanished. Unfortunately, the danger wasn't gone. Su Qing knew that time was of the utmost value to him right now. So without any hesitation, he tapped into the power of the violet crystal, causing a surge of recovery to sweep through him. At the same time, he took out some of the broken face's blood and drank a mouthful. Instantly, the blood caused intense rumbling sounds to fill him. As a result, the cracks ceased to spread out across him as quickly. Without the slightest hesitation, Su Qing took out Flame Phoenix's feather to send a message. But yet again a cracking sound echoed out. His message had been interrupted and couldn't be sent. It's not just a sealing lock. That Imperial Sovereign also has a precious treasure keeping me isolated from the outside world. Su Qing's expression was grim. He knew that in his current state, there was no way he could make a complete getaway. And his fleshly body could only sustain a few more blows. I need to think of a way to get out of here. And if I can't, then time is definitely of the utmost importance. He was currently in the inner sea, so the bigger the commotion being made, the greater the likelihood that someone would notice what was happening. As for the sealing marks left in place by his master, they were there to protect his soul. If they were forced open, Su Qing knew that the power of the broken face would cause his soul to disperse. That thought, coupled with the pain from both his fleshly body and soul, caused Su Qing to feel colder than he had felt in a long time. Having tasted that coldness, he once again entered sound and followed his senses in the direction of the dragon chariot. Maybe borrowing the strength of the chariot is my ticket to escaping. The moment Su Qing vanished, he heard Floating Fiend's voice. Erase. The word was like a nightmare. The moment it echoed out, it filled an area that went far beyond Su Qing's current location. Not only was all sound erased, but countless sea beasts simply ceased to exist. Su Qing appeared again, blood spraying out of his mouth. Behind him, Floating Fiend strode in his direction. Every step he took caused the seafloor to tremble. Each stride caused natural and magical laws to bend according to his will. It was as if heaven itself were trying to kill Su Qing. Then Floating Fiend's voice echoed out again. The magical laws here are telling me that when you killed my son, you attacked in this way. Su Qing heard the words, but before he could take control of the sound, it was gone, thanks to the authority of erasure. At the same time, the cracks started spreading out on his fleshly body again. More than ever, he felt like he was about to explode. At that moment of crisis, blinding light suddenly erupted from Su Qing as he turned into a sun. The dazzling light spread out, then converged into a beam. Moving with speed far greater than anything than before, he used a light evasion technique to shoot off into the distance. An instant later, there was no sign that it had even been present to begin with. Immortal light? Floating Fiend murmured as he appeared on the spot Su Qing had just disappeared from. He looked off into the distance and shook his head. He's still within my range, though. That said, this human clearly has a lot of karmic connections. With that much fate stirring in response to him, I can tell that killing him will bring some big negative consequences. The ancient shears once again appeared in front of Floating Fiend, which quickly severed all of the threads coming off Su Qing. However, there were some that, when the shears made contact with them, provoked a grating sound from the shears. Also, it looked more ancient and even started showing spots of rust. Apparently, even the terrifying and mysterious shears had to pay a price for cutting those threads. But at the same time, I can sense that if I do erase them, then the might of the authority will replenish me. And his fleshly body. No wonder my son died trying to get it. Karma like this plus such flesh and blood. It's like a destined opportunity covered with poison thorns that need to slowly be peeled away. I can't rush things, especially with the threads. I don't want to destroy my shears in the process. I need to handle this matter with finesse. With such thoughts in mind, Floating Fiend advanced like a hunter, focusing all of his might on the prey. Some tens of thousands of kilometers away, Su Qing appeared again, the might of an imperial sovereign bearing down on him from behind. Gritting his teeth, he sent light glittering out, then again used light evasion to flee. Light evasion was a divine ability from the profound sun immortal light magic. It was capable of unleashing astonishing speed, but it required 2 streams of light. Su Qing's immortal light only had 1 stream, which wasn't enough to power the technique. Therefore, he chose to burn soul threads, thus emitting soul light. By adding that to the immortal light, he could just barely manage to pull off the technique. It was a desperate move and it wouldn't work for long. He did it 5 or 6 times in a row. But whether it was on the surface of the water or on the seafloor, his situation never changed. It was as if there were nets above and snares below, no matter where he went. He couldn't break free, and it didn't seem possible to send messages. Even more bizarre was that Su Qing felt as though his existence was in the process of being erased. He realized this when he noticed that the sea beasts couldn't detect him. He saw a lot of non-human islands on the surface of the water, plus many boats, as well as plenty of Seven Blood Eyes disciples. And yet no one detected even a trace of him. There was one instance in which he landed on the deck of a Seven Blood Eyes boat, and yet it was almost as if he was in a different dimension. It was as if he was invisible. The realization caused Su Qing's heart to sink. In fact, as he got deeper into the sea, his complexion became increasingly unhealthy, and he seemed weaker and weaker. Gritting his teeth, he kept moving. He once again tapped into his soul threads, which resulted in him dropping from his previous level of 50 million to about half of that number. Despite that, he was still unable to escape past Floating Fiend's range. The next time he appeared in the open, he felt the might of an imperial sovereign closing in from behind him. However, Su Qing had reached his target destination. Rumbling sounds could be heard from the seafloor up ahead, along with the sound of footsteps. Those sounds seemed to be completely ignoring the authority of erasure. A terrifying pressure and aura spread madly from the seafloor, prompting Imperial Sovereign Floating Fiend to look down in that direction. Well, who could have guessed? Floating Fiend said calmly, "It's the dragon chariot of the Crown Prince of the brilliant heaven godfolk, plus his corpse of a servant. No wonder I couldn't sense this until I saw it personally. The Crown Prince of the brilliant heaven godfolk." According to our species records, this particular Crown Prince from ancient times agreed to be incarnated as a sun, while his sister incarnated as a moon. Together, they took turns illuminating revered ancient. That lasted until imminent desolation came, and both of them perished. The servant also perished, turning into nothing but a corpse. The dragon chariot and the corpse. You think those are your ticket to surviving? Su Qing didn't respond. The moment he sensed the chariot, his eyes lit up with a crazy light. Then black fire appeared around him, turning into a sea of flames. He quickly turned into an enormous golden crow. Within his claws was the severed hand of the musician as he shot toward the chariot and dragon. Su Qing was gambling. He was gambling on the fact that he had the same origin as the golden crow and the chariot, and also had the severed hand. He was gambling on karma and gambling that he wouldn't encounter too much resistance when trying to approach. All of a sudden, the severed hand's eye opened, and the fingers began to move. Natural sounds welcome the moon drifted out. Chapter 982. A slight time advantage. Sounds of nature drifted about the seafloor. The aura of death neared. Ahead. Behind. It was the same. But Su Qing in golden crow form had eyes that flashed with determination. Gripping the severed hand, he followed the rhythm of the natural sounds as he sped forward. As he did, his eyes glittered, and golden crow fire flared around him. He was like a flower made of flames as he moved along the seafloor. As a result, the seafloor shone with dazzling, eye-catching light. As he raced inexorably closer to the dragon chariot, his heart felt empty. He kept his thoughts externalized. He was completely focused on his golden crow form and the music of the severed hand. He was almost like an actual golden crow as he got closer and closer to the bronze dragon chariot. Seafloor sludge was pushed to the side while the black seawater churned. Su Qing, surrounded by fire, was the most eye-catching thing as Floating Fiend's gaze lowered onto him. The moment the gaze landed on him, Su Qing in golden crow form shuddered. He could again sense the power of an imperial sovereign's gaze. Or perhaps it was most accurate to say that he felt the weight of the authority coming from those two eyes. The power of erasure caused more cracks to appear. The gaze caused the black fire on him to start dying down. He shook from head to toe as more cracks spread out. Blood sprayed out of his mouth. It was at that exact same moment that Su Qing in golden crow form saw something incredibly terrifying some distance away in the water. It was a majestic giant. It was enormous and covered with countless tentacles that swayed and writhed. Draped over one shoulder was a massive chain that stretched behind it. At the end of the chain was a bronze dragon chariot. The chariot was very run down, covered with rust and other traces of extreme age. However, the body of the chariot had beautiful carvings that still emanated an imperial air. The giant was dragging the bronze chariot behind it as it strode across the seafloor. Each step caused waves of silt to rise up, and sent waves rolling out on the surface. Along with it came the sound of terrifying teeth crunching together. The moment Su Qing heard it, lingering fear rose within him. Despite having a much different cultivation base than the last time he encountered the chariot and giant, the pressure he felt still caused him to tremble instinctively. However, he didn't slow down. In fact, he sped up. An instant later, he pierced through the currents, passed through the silt, and appeared right in front of the massive giant and chariot. In comparison, Su Qing in Golden Crow form was incredibly tiny. However, the Golden Crow aura plus the music of the severed hand formed a special karma that couldn't be severed by the shears. Suddenly, the giant stopped in place and looked up, allowing the Golden Crow form Su Qing to pass by its head. That caused the giant's massive form to form an obstacle to Floating Fiend. Su Qing had gambled correctly. However, just as Su Qing neared the giant and chariot, Floating Fiend looked away from him. "Your dazzling body made it easy for me to lock my vision onto you," Floating Fiend said coolly. "You sought to use this giant and chariot to block my path. If my gaze of killing intent touched the giant, then it would meet some unknown conditions and result in certain complications. My son had the treasured needle of a grand emperor, and now you have it, right? You can't connect to my karma, unfortunately. You're clever, I'll give you that. But not clever enough." With that, he stepped to the side to avoid the chariot. It wasn't anything difficult as far as he was concerned. After all, no matter how shocking the chariot and dragon were in years past, the giant was now just a corpse. It didn't matter that it could still move around on instinct. Without causing it to do something, it was basically useless. That said, though Su Qing's enemy immediately realized what he was trying to do, considering how much of a crisis moment it was, how could his plan possibly be as simplistic as that which Floating Fiend had just given voice to? As Su Qing shot past the giant's massive head, the eye of the severed hand he held turned bright red. Countless ghosts appeared. Then the music that had, moments ago, been lovely sounds of nature, changed into the howling of ghosts. It was the same tune, but the sound was piercing and mournful. It had turned into the sound of countless ghosts haunting the night. What was more, the rotting moon that the severed hand had previously used on Su Qing appeared again. Instantly, the seafloor was thrown into chaos. A rotting moon rose up in front of the giant, right by Floating Fiend. The vicious face of the young woman was there, eyes opened and looking directly at Floating Fiend. A godwording like an ancestral curse spread out in shocking fashion. Godly might abounded. The giant shivered, lowered its head, and then fixed its turbid gaze on Floating Fiend. Floating Fiend frowned and stopped in place, his eyes glittering. Meanwhile, Su Qing put everything on the line by burning more soul threads to flee with light evasion. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from his position behind the giant. When he reappeared, he was 5,000 kilometers away on the surface of the water. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and more immortal mercury seeped out of the cracks in the surface of his body. Together, the blood and mercury dropped into the sea below. He was currently staggering and hardly able to stand up straight. An aura of death spread from his distorted and rotting soul. It was the curse power of the rotting moon. Though the curse spreading from the moon projection hadn't been targeting him, it was still so dangerous that it had affected him. Thankfully, he knew how to negate the curse. Therefore, the moment he appeared, he had the severed hand convert to playing the true natural sounds "Welcome the Moon." As the song entered his soul, it caused the will of rot to fade away. Next, he quickly sent a voice message, except that a moment later, his face turned extremely grim. I'm still within his range. Without any hesitation, he gritted his teeth and used light evasion again. He vanished. Time passed. Waves rolled out over the forbidden sea. The sea was black and seemed to have no end. It looked no different from usual. The species on the islands, the boats on the surface of the water, and the countless living beings all went on like normal. Cultivators cultivated. Hunters hunted. The bustling sound of activity could be heard on many islands as evening fell. The afterglow of nightfall spread out across the black waves. The sky gradually turned forbidding. Night was on the way. No one could detect or sense that a fierce chase was going on in the forbidden sea. All traces of it were erased. Floating Fiend's authority of erasure ensured that cultivators who didn't have the same cultivation base as him couldn't detect what was happening. As for the shears left behind by the vivifiant Grand Emperor, who had once followed ancient Emperor Dark Serenity, it was an ancestral device belonging to the vivifiant Holy Land, and its powers bordered on authority. It had been given to Floating Fiend by the species patriarch, where it had floated above his head for the past 100 years, repeatedly severing the misfortunes of failed breakthroughs. But there was something more significant about it. It was how Floating Fiend's breakthrough to Imperial Sovereign allowed him to get the authority of erasure. The moment Floating Fiend had succeeded, the blessing of the treasured shears enabled his powers of erasure to reach an incredibly high level. Though Grand Emperor senses couldn't be easily severed, it was possible for the shears to temporarily erase them, and it increased the range dramatically. Before, Su Qing had definitely appeared in front of people, only for them to not be able to detect him, as if he was in a different aspect of space-time. It was the same right now. From the beginning until now, the chase had been like this, quiet and undetectable. As evening was buried by night, Su Qing's soul thread count had dropped so low he only had a bit more than 3 million. He was reaching the end of what he was capable of. And even now, his sound powers weren't working. It was as if all heaven and earth were within Floating Fiend's range. Of course, that couldn't actually be possible. But as night fell, it seemed to extinguish all hope. I only have one light evasion left. Night had fallen by the time Su Qing reached a location not far from the lobster folk. His face was pale, and both his fleshly body and soul had reached their limit. That said, he was still completely calm at heart. An Imperial Sovereign was chasing him down to kill him. It was a moment of deadly crisis. But he had experienced many potentially fatal situations like this. This was probably more dangerous of a situation than any of the others, but that didn't mean he would let himself give in to negativity. Taking a deep breath, he took the human nature he had been intentionally wiping away during the chase, and completely dimmed it. Coldly rational godliness then filled him from head to toe. His eyes suddenly became vastly more profound as he turned to look behind him. He began to analyze things rationally. He knew that the giant and the dragon chariot could influence an Imperial Sovereign, but most likely it wouldn't last for long. After all, no matter how amazing the chariot, the giant, and the rotting moon were, they were all dead things. I bet this guy has a reason for letting me run away. From the look of it, my actions are furthering the erasure effect. He's basically halfway to success already. Su Qing looked down at a sea beast swimming through the water beneath him. Normally speaking, if this beast even sensed his aura from a great distance, it would flee trembling. But now it didn't even notice him. He must be afraid of my karma, so he doesn't want to just directly kill me. Seems to me that continuing to run is pointless. Su Qing wasn't sure of all the details of this person's authority, and it was difficult to narrow down its scope and principles via analysis. All he could do was use the clues he had to make a plan of action. After a few breaths of time passed, Su Qing looked down at the seafloor. He needs time to erase me, and I also need time for the outside world to realize what's going on. But theoretically speaking, he needs a lot less time. Therefore, what I need to do is slow him down, and at the same time give myself more time. That means there's one place that's perfectly suitable. After coldly assessing his remaining soul threads, he unhesitatingly started burning them, almost as if they weren't his own. Using one last light evasion, he vanished. When he reappeared, he was in the depths of the sea at a marine trench. At the same time, the severity of his wounds passed a major threshold. His physical body began to crumble. Countless bits of flesh and blood spread out. Thankfully, the immortal Mercury and the sealing marks managed to hold everything together. Even still, at the moment, Su Qing hardly looked human. His soul was also crumbling. Despite his godliness bolstering his mind and thoughts, he still lapsed into unconsciousness. However, just before passing out, he calmly sent an order to the god Vine. As he passed out, the god Vine wrapped him up and shot into the marine trench, entered the bubble, and sped toward the dilapidated pagoda. After enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, Floating Fiend appeared outside of the trench, his eyes gleaming. So, the brat came here for his last stand? Floating Fiend took a step forward and appeared outside the bubble. As he tried to enter, the bubble's force of expulsion erupted, shoving at Floating Fiend with mountain-toppling, sea-draining force. After taking more than 10 steps, Floating Fiend stopped. Looking at the dilapidated pagoda only a few dozen paces away, he frowned. Then he continued onward. Chapter 983. A wind picks up on the Forbidden Sea. Late at night, the blackness of the Forbidden Sea grew even deeper. Using the naked eye, it was impossible to see more than a foot or two before everything was swallowed by inky darkness. Stretch out your hand and you would have a hard time seeing your fingers. It was similar with the temperature. As night fell, the wind over the sea grew colder, screaming between the sea and the heaven as it blew northward. The cold wind carried a fishy smell, plus something rotten and decayed, almost like a sick old person with one foot in the grave, whose every exhalation contained an aura of death. That aura swirled about, combining with the cries of various unknown sea beasts. The night was full of mystery and fear. It was the same with the dark currents under the surface of the water. They were more violent than they were during the daytime. On the surface, they gave birth to huge waves. Under the surface, they created numerous powerful vortexes. Over the countless years that had passed, nights were always like this on the seafloor. No one knew why the whirlpools formed. They only knew that they were essentially a natural occurrence in the Forbidden Sea. It happened that way over and over again, seemingly without end. At the moment, a whirlpool rumbled through a particular area, kicking up silt to reveal numerous marine trenches that were almost like scars on the seafloor. Deep in one of those trenches was a huge bubble in the mire. Inside the bubble was a dilapidated pagoda. Outside of the pagoda was a god vine, which sent out fluctuations of anxiety and hostility. Inside the pagoda was a horribly mangled corpse. It looked almost chopped to pieces as it lay there motionless. Whatever blade had been used to chop the corpse hadn't been a sharp one. As a result, the flesh hadn't been fully sliced apart. What was more, it was connected by drooping strands of a silver substance. As time passed, the silver strands slowly began pulling the separated pieces of flesh back together. There was also a violet light shimmering faintly within the corpse. A few days passed. When the pieces of the corpse had all been pulled back together, it looked a bit more human. However, it was still covered with numerous cracks and was appalling to look at. But then bits of life force began to pulse within it, as if it were being called back from the netherworld. The closed eyes slowly opened and though weak, they pulsed with incomparable coldness. The fact that I'm here and alive proves that I made the right decision. The imperial sovereign from the vivifiant Holy Land was unable to get through the bubble and into this pagoda. I got back that slight time advantage. Su Qing looked calm on the outside and was in fact very calm on the inside. He still maintained a certain level of godliness, giving him the ability to analyze the situation with cool rationality. His god perception was weak, but he sent it out to check the situation outside. Eventually he sat up. As he did, his body and soul ached with intense pain, such that most people would go mad or pass out. But filled as he was with godliness, Su Qing apparently didn't even notice it. However, it did take him quite a bit of time. In fact, it was only after 12 breaths of time passed that he was able to fully sit up. Taking out some of the broken face's blood, he consumed it, then closed his eyes and began meditating. He wanted to speed up his recovery as quickly as possible and get his cultivation base back to its peak level. Simultaneously, he would use the time he had bought to wait for help to come. Floating Fiend was seated cross-legged on the other side of the bubble, his face completely expressionless. A pair of rusty shears hovered overhead, shining with dim light. A terrifying mightiness circulated within them. They created a power that could cut off anything from the outside world and erase all signs of everything. It made it so that anyone observing the area would see nothing at all there. Even the shears were fundamentally not there. This is quite an extraordinary defensive barrier. The only way to get past it is with that sage heaven god vine. 3 days had passed in which Floating Fiend had tried a variety of methods to break into the bubble. All had failed. With great force he could walk 12 steps inside but couldn't get any further. At that point, the force of rejection from the bubble was too much for him to sustain. That doesn't mean there's no way to break inside, though. I just need to temper my imperial sovereign authority a bit more. All that will require is time. 100 days should be enough. There's another possibility that could work right away, which would be to use the essence power of the shears. Forcibly using the essence power of the shears would wear them down much more quickly. Or, if the effect was too severe, It could result in the shears disappearing entirely and returning to become part of a great Tao. That was something he couldn't accept. Most importantly, when he was chasing Su Qing, he had seen too many karma threads that he feared. He simply didn't dare to sever them directly. Besides, he had already tapped into some of the essence of the shears, specifically the Grand Emperor might. That was how he had erected the temporary barrier of concealment. If he did more than that, the shears would likely melt, once again becoming part of a great Tao. Then he would never be able to use them again. And all the barriers he had created between himself and those terrifying karma threads would vanish. If that happened, powerful experts would definitely show up right away. What's more, assimilating his fleshly body will take time. Time that I wouldn't have in that scenario. After a lot of thought, Floating Fiend focused his gaze on the dilapidated pagoda inside the bubble. Gradually, his eyes started shining. I can't quite accept failure. That's the flesh of the broken face. His body is probably the only one like it in the world. Combine that with the stories I've heard about immortal Mercury, and it means that his fleshly body, despite having so much karma, is probably the work of a summer immortal, or possibly someone even more powerful than that. If I can get it, then I just need to stay hidden until the Empty Star Holy Land arrives. And then, even if that almighty individual gets greedy, he won't risk getting involved with Eminent Desolation's karma. In other words, chances are he'll just let me do my thing. With his protection, then this brat's karma can be wiped out easily, and the vivifiant Holy Land will rise to new heights. After a bit more thought, he made his decision. I have 3 options. Maybe it'll be risky, but those who search for the Tao are born in the morning and die in the evening. It'll be worth it. When destined opportunities are born, anything is possible. 1. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Floating Fiend closed his eyes. Almost at the exact same moment, a tremor passed through him, and a host of bloody flesh strands began to seep out of him and extend toward the bubble. They were so densely packed they were difficult to count, but there were definitely no less than 10 million. Soon, the bloody flesh strands had wrapped up the entire bubble, whereupon they started slowly pulling it toward him. It was as if they were trying to pull the bubble right up to him so he could absorb it. Floating Fiend paid very close attention to the process. However, what he was looking most closely at wasn't the absorption process. Instead, he was keeping an eye on the Grand Emperor's treasure floating overhead, as well as the surroundings. He was also checking to see if Su Qing was doing anything. In that manner, time passed. The following day in the port at 7 Blood Eyes, Second Elder Sister sat in a 7th Peak Pagoda handling various sect matters. Because of the arrival of the vivifiant Holy Land, and the interactions with the people from there, the situation in the Forbidden Sea seemed to be going smoothly on the outside, but in reality was very tense. 7 Blood Eyes was active both in the continent of South Phoenix and in the Holy Tide region, and was considered an apex power. As a result, they had more responsibilities to handle than before. Su Qing was out training, Erniu seemed reluctant to leave his non-human friends, and Third Sib was roaming the mainland, sowing wild oats and disinclined to come back to the sect. Their master was in seclusion, and the patriarch was experiencing young love for a second time. That meant that the only person left behind in 7 Blood Eyes to handle things was Second Elder Sister. Although the other mountain peaks offered a lot of support, it was obvious that the 7th peak was in charge of things. Second Elder Sister was busy every single day. It pained Huang Yan to see his beloved wife in such a situation. He kept her company constantly, and the flattering look never left his face. He would occasionally knead her shoulders, would sometimes kneel to massage her legs, and would find time to put fresh fruit on her desk. He would even carefully peel pieces of fruit and place them in Second Elder Sister's mouth. He took care of her in every possible way. At the moment, he was also cursing her fellow apprentices. The first time I laid eyes on that Chen Erniu, I knew he was a scoundrel. Now he just can't bear to part with those non-humans, which directly leads to you being so busy, Elder Sister. Damn him. And then there's Third Sib. He's just as bad as Erniu. He's definitely going to die of exhaustion sooner or later. As for Ah Qing, Huang Yan was going to continue speaking when Second Elder Sister suddenly looked up at him. Huang Yan cleared his throat. He knew that his wife wasn't very articulate or expressive, But deep down, she cared deeply for her master and fellow apprentices. He quickly changed his tone. Well, Ernyu isn't that bad. And third Sib is alright too. Aching is the best, of course. Speaking of which, I haven't been in touch with him for a few days. Before Huang Yan could say anything else, his transmission jade slip vibrated. It wasn't just his. Second elder sister's jade slip also received an incoming message. They took their jade slips out simultaneously, checked the message, and then looked at each other with serious expressions. The message was from Ernyu. The garment folk were a great distance away from South Phoenix, so Ernyu had sent a message that needed to be routed through transmission portals in multiple prefectures before it finally arrived. I recently had an inexplicable uneasy feeling. It's like something really big happened. Second Sib and second brother-in-law, is little Aching doing well with you too? I can't get in touch with him. Second elder sister immediately sent a voice message to Su Qing. When she didn't get a response, she sent a message to Sir Bloodsmelter asking for any information. Her last interaction with Su Qing had been a request for him to go check on their grandmaster. The patriarch quickly responded. When second elder sister saw the message, her expression turned grave, and she looked at Huang Yan. Fourth Sib went chasing after a godly entity, and now nobody can get in touch with him. Huang Yan yawned and smiled placatingly. It's fine, really. There are a lot of things on the seafloor that can disrupt transmissions. It's totally normal. There aren't any godly entities that can pose a threat to that little punk. Besides, I gave him one of my feathers. If he runs into anything really dangerous, he would reach out to me. But since you're worried, I'll see if I can track him down. Huang Yan cast his senses out to his feather. An instant later, his eyes went wide, and flames were visible within them. He couldn't sense his feather at all. Just looking at second elder sister, he could sense the emotions roiling within her, so he plastered a relaxed smile onto his face. Don't worry. I found him. The little punk ran into a sea beast that's on the verge of igniting godfire. I'll go take care of it right now. With that, he turned to leave. Huang Yan, second elder sister, said. He stopped in place and turned to look at his wife with a genuine smile on his face. Bring fourth Sib back, she said softly. Don't worry. With a hearty laugh and a relaxed facial expression, Huang Yan turned back around and kept walking. As soon as he was facing in the other direction, his expression turned extremely serious. An instant later he was gone. Out on the forbidden sea, in a location not visible from Seven Blood Eyes, dark clouds roiled in the sky, obscuring the sun and casting the sea into shadow. Endless lightning crashed in the clouds, and something that looked like a phoenix and an eagle could just barely be seen flying overhead. Its brown torso looked like a mountain boulder, and its feathers were like burning flames. Wherever it passed, the sky ignited. It was none other than Flame Phoenix. What powerful entity is out there that blocked my senses?